Funding for The Rotor Workshop is provided in part by Hitachi Power Tools, manufacturers of a full range of construction and woodworking power tools. Today in The Rotor Workshop, the last of our two-part series, Hall Mirror and Table. Rotor Pro Bob Rosendahl uses the miter gauge to create slick dovetail joinery, and Rick cuts a 45-degree chamfer into legs to mount the hanger bolts. That's the conclusion of the Hall Mirror and Table project. Next, right here in the Rotor Workshop.
This is part 2 of the mirror frame and the hall table. We're going to do the hall table today, Dad, and what are you going to start with?
Well, I think I'll do the cross pieces under here and the rails, Rick, and then you can do the legs and round the top, and then we should have it finished.
Boy, this is going to be fast. We'll get her done here now. I'll just move this out of the way so you can get started.
I'll go at it. I'm going to start off. We're going to dovetail the cross pieces into the rails, and the rails are 2 different lengths in it. And the dovetail's a standard dovetail. It's a 1/2-inch dovetail, 14 degree. We're going to mount that in our table mount to start with. And then we're going to use a jig to run them with because we want the pins of the dovetails to match the slots that we cut, without measuring them, of course. Now, get that in there, the dovetail bit, and we're going to put a guide in. And the guide we're going to put in is 1 inch in diameter, sticks above the top, 1/4 inch. And we got a ring nut on the back side here. We'll just pop that in, and then I'll let you have a look at it. See if I can get them threads started. There we go. Remember, you finger tighten them. Now, bring it over here and have a look. The guide is 1 inch diameter. We've got a 1/2-inch bit in it. Now, let's put it in there. You'll notice that our table doesn't have any grooves in it where you can use a miter gauge. So we've got a very unique miter gauge here. We've got the 1 inch guide and the miter gauge. First part of it, anyway, fits across there and runs just simply along the outside edge. But what we need to do, and I'll get my materials over here, let you have a look. What we need to do on the inside edge, and we'll pick a face side of these, is run a groove right through here of a dovetail slot. That'll be the first one. Then we're going to take these slope pieces, the 45 angles on them, and we're going to run a dovetail pin on the ends of each of those, and that should fit inside of it. So let's just set up here and see what I got to do. We'll set those 2 pieces there. The only thing I really need is set the height of the bit. Remember, the height of the bit makes the tight or loose fit. The higher the bit, the tighter the fit. That's about all you have to remember. Now, we're going to just check that, and that should be good. What we need again to do is that we've got a leg going across this corner. And this corner piece fits in here. So it's this distance in it. And we've got kind of a measurement of that, and I'm going to tell you what it is a little later. We're going to have a distance in here, and all of these rails will be that same distance. And then when the pin goes on, the leg comes in and we use a hanger bolt. But let's just set these over here. I need the other 2 rails. We got 2 long rails and 2 short ones on that table. We'll just keep those close by here. And we got the height of the bit, and I'll lock that into place. Now, got my clamp here. What else do I need? I guess I got everything I need. So, what distance are we going to use? Well, I pick a face side here, and I'll put a face side on it. I'll probably pick one of these. Looks like it's a nice surface. Kind of neat about wood sometimes when you're cutting in it, and I noticed this piece here when I rolled it over, it had just a little bit of a wane on the side here, maybe a little bark had been. By putting it on the inside, then you don't get to see that, so we'll put it down. Now that distance that we've got in here, and what it measures really, is to the center of that bit, to the outside edge of there, is the width or the squareness of your leg. That's just a mathematical thing. Somebody tells me that isn't correct, but I use it because it works. And we'll lock it down here. Now, the reason I put a lot of pressure, you can see the pitch in it, that bit's turning in that direction, and it may have a tendency to pull that otherwise if you don't have the tension on. Now, it really doesn't matter how we go here. We'll cut it. I'm going to cut one. I'll stop, let you look, and then we'll cut the rest. And now we're ready to go. And again, if you're watching there, I didn't push very fast. I give it time to cut. Get nice cuttings coming off of there. And I'll just tip that up and you can see the nice clean cut. Now, what we've got is a dovetail slot in. If you look down in that, it's coming in very neat inside here. And I need that on the ends of both long ones and the short ones. And this distance should be always the same. And at the top here, I've got a mark here that I'm using. And I'm setting this mark in it and locking it down. Now, so we'll set it up here and we'll get to go and cut it. Now we're ready. Now, we've got all the slots in it. You may get a little bit of tear out on either side in it. Most of the time we don't worry about that because what we like to do is probably just joint off the edges after. So if you rip those to a certain size, make them about 1/8 of an inch wider. Then you can take a 1/16 off with your joiner fence and you've got a clean cut to work with and it'll always be up in there. Let's just set that over here to one side and let's go to this. Now, here's the thing. We got to get a dovetail pin to match that on the side. So we need some method to hold it. So we got a fence here that fits in. Got brass pins in here, and those brass pins go into holes. And those are spacer holes in it. So we'll set it up like that. And we'll bring that back. Now that'll have a tendency to slip here, so we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to use a clamp. And we'll clamp the clamp into place here. Lock it down. Tighten it into place. Now, you see where I'm working on here, I've got a surface here to work on, so I got the flat part of it. That's how I set it up. Now, to make the first cut, I'm going to bring it back, that one set of holes, and pop it in here. Now, when I come across, then I can do the second one. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up, and I'm going to stop. Maybe I'll even stop and talk to you a little bit about that. Now there is the first half of the dovetail pin. That's the first half of the pin. Now I simply have to move it ahead one. Remember the bit's inside, it stopped in there. We're going to set up in here and come back to it again. Now if I can just get that locked into spot here, I'm going to have to get rid of a little bit of dirt there first, and then we'll lock it in. Now, remember the dovetail's in there, and the reason I'm coming back out again, the bit's turning that direction, so I'm always cutting in the rotation of the bit. So we'll set it up, lock it in, start it. I should have a dovetail pin on a 45 degree on the end of that corner block. There it is. There's the dovetail pin. But does it fit? Now, there's my slot. Here's the pin. Tip it up the right way in here, and we'll see if we get a fit. Well, we're not going to get a fit with that little chip in the way there, but we should. Isn't it nice when it fits? That's what we want it to do. We got a nice fit there. Now, we're going to continue and cut the rest of them. We got a few of those to do. One thing to keep in mind, when you're working with a fixture like this or anything in guides, while the bit's running, don't go in here and lift this off. You may just touch the bit and you ruin your fixture in it. So wait till it stops, built up, cut nice. We got all the dovetails on the pieces. Now, the only thing we don't have, we could assemble that frame. The only thing we don't have is we need some kind of a method to fasten these rails to the tabletop. We got to get in here with screws, so we have to make some kind of pockets, and we got a neat process for doing that. I'm going to set this aside here, and we don't even have to change the bit in it. We'll just drop that down. I think I'll take this guide out of here, though, and get it out of the way. We're going to cut some divots, And these little divots are nothing more than a 45-degree bit, just like a chamfer bit in it. And we're going to turn that in there. So we'll take this guide out of here, and maybe I should just take and dust this off. Kind of nice to have a vacuum in here, of course, would have helped keep that clean. Now, I'm going to clamp this in here. I'm going to put a couple little divots. And the little divots, we're going to put 2 screws in it. And I'm going to talk to you a little further about the screws later. The distance that these divots are from the edge will determine the length of the screw that you're going to use. So we'll see if we can clamp that down into place here. And I might have to slide that ahead a little bit to get room. See how that works. Now, the router that I've got is a portable router. And inside of it, we chucked up a 45-degree bit. And I've got the fence on. There's the bit. It's got 2 cutters on it, one on either side, and it's just going to cut a little divot in it. Now, I've got that set down here, and I don't need it quite that deep, so I'm going to shallow that up. We don't need it that deep in it. And I'm going to go to the side here, and I'll just loosen and lower that pole stop down to lock it. What we're going to do is going to position that over and have that fence up there, get that by. And then I'm just going to plunge down, not move the bit, router any direction, just going to plunge down and put it in. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to plunge down and catch the next one. And they'll both be done. So we just set up here. Looks like I got it set just about where I want it. We'll unplug this other router and make sure that the switch is in off position. And we're ready to go. So we'll position it about there. Now, I'll tip that up. This is where you take your drill now and drill a hole down there, a pilot hole to let that go through. And when you drill those holes for your wood screws, make dang sure that you drill the hole big enough so the screw slips through. Don't thread the screw through. If you thread it, when it starts in the bottom, then you have that space. And also remember when you put those screws down and you're tightening away, don't keep feeling on the face side of the table for the screw to come through, because it eventually will, and then you'll be in trouble. So that's the 2 that we need. Now I'm going to go to the other side. Normally, if you had a table that was square, this big a rail, you'd need some in it also. But seeing we're so small in here, we won't need a screw in the end of the table. We'll just do them on the 2 sides. So let me just put that back in here. And we'll tighten this down. Make sure it's tight. You got to get your fence along the side here. There is no pull or anything on it. And this is a guesstimate, you know. These screws can go wherever. If you like to measure them, you can go ahead and measure them if you wish. But I just put them in there at random kind of. Now, that operation's almost done, but there's one more here. And seeing that Rick's got some setups over there for rounding over, we're going to leave that to him. And what we'd like to do with these pieces, I'm going to get Rick to do this, is wherever these fit together now, we put a piece in here like that, and then we get the next rail across the top that goes in there like that. We'd like this outside of these rails rounded over. Otherwise, they're pretty rough in it. If you really want to go at it, you can round them inside too if you wish in them. But I'm going to pass them off to Rick here and let him round them off.
Now what we need to do is cut the 45 on here so it can receive the hanger bolt. I've already got it marked here. I've got a 45-degree bit mounted into the tool, and all we need to do now is set up the bit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put the fence over here and put the one clamp on the one side. Because I can't mark on poly very well, what I'm going to do is take and put a piece of masking tape across it, and we're going to mark the center of the bit so that when I lay this other piece in place here, I can find out exactly where my line's going to be. Now what I'm going to do is, I've got the pre-marked, I'm going to line this mark up with the mark that I have marking the center. And when I do that, that's going to be about there. This is not really that critical, but we'll get close. Now what I want to do is I just want to run the cutter up and stop it right on the line. And then because this is a bit, we can just pull it away. It'll be real easy. So now what we want to do is just have the bit go over top of the point. And because we're just making a flat spot, it's not that critical that it be right on, just so long as it does produce a flat spot so that when you drill the hole, you don't have it wandering. All right, now let's look at the piece here that I've got here. I've decided to go ahead and use this up underneath. That doesn't mean that this is a damaged piece. Because it's going up underneath where it's hidden, hey, that's what's good part about it. So now, we just need to do is plug it in, And let's go ahead and put our flat spots on. Now what we need to do is go ahead and drill a hole in here so we can put the hanger bolts. I'll go ahead and finish off all these, and then we'll get the rest of them over here and we'll mold them as well. And then we've got all the pieces molded. The next operation is to go ahead and round over all of the edges. So I'm going to change the bit to a 1/4 inch round over bit, and we'll round over all the legs. So we'll change the bit here, and we'll take off the fence first to get rid of this masking tape. Unplug your tool before you move it out. And let's change the bit. And the router bit we're going to put in here is a 1/4 inch round over bit. Now the critical part here is to make sure that the fence or the tabletop of the router table is right flush, because the bearing's flush. We don't want to put any lines on our pieces. We want to make them perfectly flat and flush. So we're going to make sure that we got the round over bit set up perfectly before we start. And if you don't have it set up right, I always found that if you keep running pieces, it doesn't get any better. So you want to make sure you get it right before you start. All right, so we'll line it up so it's right on the line. We've got it set up, drop it back down in. And because I'm working with square pieces here, I'm going to go back to the fence again and just isolate the bearing so we can work with it. Get it over here so we can see what's going on. And let me get a stick of material here so I can isolate the bearing. There we go. And let's go ahead and get ready here to round over the pieces. We need to plug in our router one more time, and let's go ahead and cut them. Bring them all over. And there we go. Now that I got all the pieces here cut, rounded over and finished, I'm going to pass those on to Dad and get the rails from him. All right, let's finish the rails here. Now looking at these rails here, there's some parts that don't need to be rounded and some parts that do need to be rounded. So we want to pick the bottom part of the rail. On the sides, we have the legs coming into it. On the top, we have the tabletop. So we should pick the parts that just need the rounding on it, and I'm just going to mark them so we can see which ones we're going to do, and then all we need to do is look for the X. If you get all this marked here, you got to make sure you've got it marked properly before you go ahead and cut it, because you don't want it to be wrong. The only time you find out that it's wrong is when you're assembling it. So let's finish the rounding of the rails. You notice I made this one wrong. The only way that it tells you is where you've got the divots put in place, so it's already set up for you. I've got one more thing to do, and that's to round off the top. I'm going to finish that, and we'll be just about ready to assemble. Bring that top in here. Let's finish the round over.
Now it's time for Tips from the Workshop, Viewer Mail, and Tricks of the Trade on Rotor Bits, Tips, and Wood Chips.
The tip for today is using an edge beating bit to dress up your rails. And I've got it set up here. If you look very carefully at this part of the cutter goes right into the rail. And then what we've got is a full half round. I've set up the half round so that the cutting edge of the tool is right flush to the surface of the table. That way, we're going to get a nice feathered edge on it. To start with, we need to put a fence on it because we are working with our pieces standing on edge. And the way I want to set it up here is we'll clamp the first one, and it does have a bearing. We're not necessarily going to use the bearing today because we are using straight pieces again. Anytime you can get away from using the bearing, do so, and that's only when you're using the straight pieces. So we're going to isolate the bearing. We've got the bearing isolated, and let's put the clamp down on the other side here, tighten it down. And let's bring our piece in here to look at what we're going to edge. Now, we've picked the face side now. All we want to do is dress the bottom corner of this piece a little differently than just a round over. All right. And you can use very different types of bits as well. I'm going to use a block here to keep her tight, and let's go ahead and cut it. That gives us a nice clean cut, making it look that much better.
I got all the bolts in, Rick.
I got all the round over stuff done.
Well, first thing to
we
do.
have a lot of pieces here. We just got to watch which piece has been round over so we don't get it backwards.
Okay.
You might get a chance to look at that after you've got it glued together. That's when you find you got the wrong side rolled over.
Okay.
All right.
And put these in the right way too, I guess.
Yep. Make sure you put them on right.
And we'll tip that up like that. We got round edge out. Round edge out. Now we need some legs
in here.
And a leg.
There we go. And got to get a couple of bolts here before I get too many legs.
Yep.
Using these wing nuts make this thing really easy to take it apart and put it together. Eh?
Sure snugs it up there good.
Great for moving or painting or staining.
Ah, that one's good. Got the last one in here. Now,
well, let's flip it down and show the folks when we get it down.
Should have a look at where them screws go, I guess, eh? You tip that up there.
Let's tip it down.
Right down.
And we'll... All right, there's the...
Now, when you fasten that together with screws, people, what we should use is a round head or a pan head because they're flat on the bottom. Don't have a taper, otherwise it'll split your wood apart in it.
All right.
No.
Oh, and make sure that they're not too long, right?
Oh, yeah, not too long.
Dad and I are out of here for now, but I hope to see you next time right here in the Router Workshop.
We'd like to hear from you. You can email us at the address on your screen. Send your comments, questions, or project ideas to the Router Workshop, Post Office Box 608, Chamberlain, South Dakota 57325, or in Canada, the Router Workshop, Post Office Box 280, Ely, Manitoba ROH-OHO. To learn more about the Router Workshop, visit us at the internet address on your screen. Next time in the Router Workshop, a unique CD storage case. Using a special shop-made jig, Bob and Rick show you a quick and easy way to mortise slots to hold and protect your CDs. You'll also discover a unique method of dovetailing the modules so that they can be locked together or used separately. The CD storage case, next time in the Router Workshop. Funding for The Router Workshop is provided in part by Hitachi Power Tools, manufacturers of a full range of construction and woodworking power tools. For $16.99 plus $4.99 shipping and handling, you can order Bob and Rick Rosenthal's The Router, a 130-page book which includes a plan to build the router table and bench, plus numerous tips, techniques, and educational information. Call 1-800-803-1449.